On February 10, 2008, the winds of Roanoke County began to blow into the largest fire incident the county has ever faced. That afternoon, 40 to 60 mile-per-hour winds whipped an approximately 3-foot by 3-foot brush fire out of control to scorch the land in the Lock Haven and Timberview areas of Roanoke County, ultimately joining together to create one large fire. When contained 9 days later, the GreenRidgeMtnFire had burned over 4,000 acres, but no structures or lives were lost during the incident.
February the 10th, I got up that morning, and like everyone knows, extremely windy that day, and was waiting for the pager to go off. Knew with those weather conditions that something was going to happen that day.
I had been listening to the radio here in Roanoke County, and you could gradually hear, as the wind picked up, you could hear the calls starting to come in for wires down, roofs blown off buildings. Actually, one of our fire stations lost its roof. And you could just tell with the low humidity and the high winds that the potential was very great for something to happen. And sure enough, within minutes, it started coming in. We had multiple calls come in at the same time. Of course, the Green Ridge fire being the most serious and the largest fire.
At that time, I was already in our dispatch center because we had received a call earlier from Bedford County asking for an assistance for a brush fire that had already started in Bedford County. So I was up there trying to arrange with our division chief some resources that we could send to Bedford County.
That particular day, of course, I was off with it being Sunday, but I was actually teaching a class at our training center, Instructor 1 class, and it was close to lunchtime when everything in the whole valley kind of started getting busy due to the winds.
Initially, I was a staff callback person for that day for the operations battalion, and once I received the phone call, I was the overall incident commander for the management of the incident initially and throughout the incident.
Very early, within an hour or so, we had every fire resource in the county was committed. At one point in time, we had over 200 firefighters actively fighting fire at multiple locations in the county.
A couple of hours into it, we had three fairly significant brush fires in the county happening at the same time. So I was just assisting with trying to get resources to all three fires, trying to find any additional personnel, and even trying to talk to our mutual aid companies to try to get assistance from them.
We had a lot of calls going on at the time. Roads were blocked, wires were down, and that really gave us an indication. We had received a teletype from the Weather Bureau that we were expecting high winds, so we were starting to expect it, but that was probably the main incident for us in the center. When we knew that roof blew off, we knew we were in trouble.
When we arrived at the end of this gravel road here, there was wires down. It looked like 2 poles that were down with wires arcing, but there was no smoke, no fire showing when we got here. Marked on scene with nothing showing, marked in command. Once we got here, we pulled an 1 3/4 line off, which wasn't enough to get close to the fire, so by the time we added a section of hose to it, the fire went from about 3 feet to started down in the bottom right there and just went to the left, and big gust of wind and it was gone.
When we first arrived here, we had somewhere probably in the ballpark of 30, 40 mile an hour winds. The conditions were very cold. The initial crew had started to pull lines and was starting to put out some part of the fire. The winds really picked up hard and several gusts come in and just started taking the fire away from what we were originally starting.
So after I wrapped the hydrant and charged the line, I walked back up to the truck, and that was the first time I ever saw any fire. Where I was at the hydrant, I couldn't see any fire, and then I was assigned to a hand line and tried to establish a line around the fire.
One of the biggest things is just trying to get your arms around it and maintain safety and accountability for your people that have boots on the ground. We were able to get another division chief on the south side, another battalion on the south side, and once those incidents started to downscale, we were able to focus our attention more so on the cascading event that was happening over here on the Green Ridge fire.
And so I went to the Timberview area just to see if the two fires were growing together, and at that point that's when we realized that we did have two fires that were impinging on each other and was going to make one large fire, so that division was kind of passed over to me.
I basically got with Chief Maxey and down on Angel Lane, and we sort of put our heads together and decided that conditions weren't really safe to put people in the woods at that point because of the wind. The fire conditions weren't really that bad actually, but we were more concerned with wind, snags falling, that sort of thing. So we decided not to go into the woods, basically going to take a defensive mode and protect structures and sort of let the fire go where it was going to go.
The first line of defense, we tried to make a defense here at this Angel Lane location. We did several things. One is we wanted to try to protect the power station behind me here, not knowing how many people it affected. The other was there's some properties up behind the church here on Angel Lane, a couple bunkhouses, a tool shed garage type facility that with the direction of travel we wanted to try to first of all protect the structures, and second of all we did make an attempt to try to cut it off, but those attempts, just with the high volume of wind and the rapid moving fire, were unsuccessful.
My role here with the county is Emergency Services Coordinator, so coordinating the opening of the EOC and so forth. Since that had been opened, my first roles were started coordinating statewide mutual aid, coordinated that with the state EOC, and actually that was the first time in the county here that we had requested assistance through the statewide mutual aid program. So,
besides fire agency, we also had the assistance of the Department of Forestry, which was somewhat limited because they were spread thin. As I mentioned earlier, there was a big fire in Bedford that started the day before. And then eventually, before it was over with, the governor approved for the National Guard. We had approximately 60 National Guard folks that came in and spent several days with us helping on the fire line.
The fire was called in about 12:36, I think, to be exact. We had a request very shortly after that, somewhere a little bit after 1, for resources. So, yeah, actually I was at the regional office. Myself and another individual were trying to coordinate movement of resources. We had a number of, well, actually fires that had started the previous day, so we were, up early that morning on Sunday morning, well aware of what kind of conditions we could have and what the situation might be for that day. So basically we were just trying to make sure that we have resources in strategic places and be able to respond as well as we could.
Certainly the Red Cross helped, and many other fire departments, as I mentioned earlier, from over 130 miles away. And in county departments, we had tremendous support from other county departments. Our IT department helped us with maps. Our communications center certainly handling the volume of calls. We had assistance from other departments just in the administrative operation of the Emergency Operations Center. So the support was just overwhelming, both locally and on the state level.
I was involved in a lot of helicopter flying, GPS in the fire. Worked a lot with our GIS folks, developing maps, that sort of thing, calculating acreages, just mapping fire progression. You can plug my GPS into the computer, download all those, and then with the help of our GIS people, we would spit out maps with different layers of things we would want to see.
For our purposes, he was using a handheld unit, often in the helicopter, but also he could take it and walk around and get accurate coordinates, and that would let us plot these points on the map to give us our fire coverage area. In addition, we took those same maps to the board meeting, so when the chief was trying to explain what was going on and how the money was being spent and time and hours and so forth, they could actually visually see what it was he was talking about, even if they weren't familiar with the area. So I think it proved to be very, very useful, and in fact, I think State Forestry came back to us a few weeks later and asked if they could get the data that we had used in our GPS system so they could have it on record, because it was the first time they felt it had been used in this way and this thoroughly.
Once we explained what was going on and so forth, the other departments in the counties were there. They either came, the department directors were either there, or they sent someone who had an expertise in our specific request, such as mapping. They had a staff there that had expertise in developing the maps that we needed, and they were on site with equipment and functioned beautifully.
The fire this size and the winds and where it was spreading and all, and citizens certainly wanted to know what was happening, what was safe and what was not safe. So we did that through multiple and timely news media releases so the news media could carry it. But we also included it on the county website, which was somewhat surprising to me that many people went there and looked at it, but we found that they did. We found one time that we just didn't update it quite as fast as we wanted to, and people called. They wanted to know it, why it hadn't been updated. So we learned a valuable lesson there, just how important that website is in getting information to our citizens.
Wagon 10 at that time had been reassigned to Timberview Road, and they were being overtaken by fire. They were calling for help, practically begging the Lock Haven Command to send more manpower to them.
As the fire trucks came out, 2 of the trucks were able to clear, and then a tree fell blocking one of the other fire trucks and 2 of the residents that were trying to be led out by the fire company. So at that point in time, things really got real intense. We were very concerned about life safety at that point. The fire crews did a great job. They were able to cut the tree out of the road. One of the engines attempted to put the vehicle fire out. At that point in time, it was more important to get everybody out than it was to try and put the vehicle out, so we just abandoned the vehicle fire and just had everybody proceed on out.
We actually went up the right side of the fire to get to the top of the ridge, and we were on the top of the ridge trying to keep it from going over the back side. And while we were up there, we were ever aware of dead trees or snags, making sure that the wind weren't going to push them over on us, as well as push one over to have the fire jump the line we had established.
So throughout the entire incident on the Green Ridge fire, there were approximately 64 homes, buildings, residents that were threatened at one time. The fire came within feet of several of these structures, and I believe the total value that was saved, we did not lose any structures, was around $16 million.
The crews there, we pretty much decided amongst ourselves with the fire conditions that were there that there was going to be 3 homes lost. Once we pulled back, reevaluated, made sure everybody was safe, we had the proper safety equipment, we had a water supply worked out. Once the weather cooperated a little bit with us, we were able to go back in and reevaluate the structure conditions. We were very surprised to find them still standing, and to the point where some of them even had all the shrubbery and flowers burned out of the flower bed, but the home was still intact.
We had a business that is a seasonal business, and they were closed for the winter time, and the gentleman that owned that Lock Haven Lake came back and just gave us the keys and said we could use it and use his building for as long as we needed it, and just gave us ownership of it more or less. And that served to be very valuable because of the strategic location to the fire.
Monday morning, once the on-duty BC came in, then I came up to the EOC and assumed the role as a logistics officer of trying to decide how much food we were going to need when, whether we were going to need fuel and supplies to support the personnel and the operations going on. And we started off ordering lunches and dinners and trying to predict how many people we would have. I can't remember if it was Monday or Tuesday, they decided to open up the center at Lock Haven Lake, and that's when we were able to start sending a lot of the supplies there and farming them out. For the most part, we went and picked up the meals after they were ordered. Tried to give the restaurants as much notice as we could. When you started calling about 9:30, trying to pick up something at 10:30, you found out some people weren't able to meet those deadlines. So we learned to be a little bit more proactive and try to give them several hours notice.
Probably, I guess, most of all, for me is reinforcement of the criticality of the training and continuous education for the dispatchers. I think if we hadn't have been prepared for it from training, I don't think we'd have been able to make it. That was the main thing, I guess, and teamwork. We functioned as a team. The whole center pulled together, and it was no question, of teamwork. And I think the criticality of that really made this operation work and was very successful for us.
Well, we had several. I think one was the demand on our people. We went to 12-hour shifts, and we found that they were turning into 14 and 16-hour shifts. And after a few days, they were very tired. They weren't getting the rest that they needed. So we were going to look at that as one thing. Communications and radios. We have extra radios and common TAC channels, but due to the volume of calls and multiple calls, we had some communications issues. Just the overall coordination of something this big, there were many little lessons learned. We did an outstanding job, but it was just something this large, you'll always learn something.
Well, one of the first things the department has done is actually critique this incident and went back and looked at the things that we've done well and the things that we need to improve upon. One of the things that we have done practically has been to have each battalion and captain go through a 7-day incident management course that basically runs them through each role of your incident command structure, from giving them experience in the plannings area, logistics area, operations area, from those types of positions, and that gave them a new perspective of learning the challenges in each one of those roles. We tend to get locked into operating and fighting the fire when there's a lot of other things that have to happen to enable those on the fire scene to work efficiently and adequately.
I think the dedication of our fire and rescue personnel, it was a big demand on them, and they put themselves in harm's way, some very dangerous situations, and they did it professionally.
How quick the fire took off from where it started, how quick it got to be a big fire from a small grass fire. And they'll never let me live it down. The marking on scene with nothing showing, biggest fire in Virginia.